With more than 6,000 small and microcap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple at the earliest stage, then channelchek truly is the orchard. The listed companies support channelchek, so it's free for you, the potential investor, to gain access to institutional quality research from FINRA licensed analysts, advanced market data, industry reports, news, and a growing catalog of videos and webcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and register for channelchek so you're always up to date on what's going on at the small and microcap data place. Welcome to the C-Suite series presented by channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered, FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on channelchek. Today's interview features Townsquare Media, NYSE ticker symbol TSQ. Noble Senior Research Analyst Michael Kupinski interviews Townsquare Media's CEO, Bill Wilson. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description for Noble's research on Townsquare, as well as news and advanced market data. And now, here's Michael and Bill.
This is Michael Kupinski, the Director of Research at Noble Capital Markets and also the Media and Entertainment Analyst for Noble. And with us today, we have Bill Wilson, the CEO of Townsquare Media. This is a C-suite interview, and in a C-suite interview, we try to get to know management. And so I'm going to ask a few questions about Bill and his background. So Bill, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate being here.
Bill, I can't think of a better executive to lead the digital transition of a traditional radio company than you. You have an amazing background, but probably one of the more interesting experiences that you've had was being the president of AOL Media. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about your background and at AOL and how that experience helped prepare you for the digital transformation at Townsquare.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michael. Yes, I joined AOL in 2001, so literally 20 years ago. And at that time, AOL was going through a time of disruption and transformation as well. And they were primarily at that time around internet connectivity, the way people connected to the internet. And they recognized with the competitors of broadband and cable companies, they wanted to create a content business to attract an audience and then to generate money through advertising, which they had never done before. It was all based on number of subscribers connecting to the internet. So I was recruited from the music industry to join there to create engaging content and content that would attract an audience, and then they can monetize that audience. So quite honestly, I couldn't think of a better experience at AOL to really set me up for the transformation of Townsquare from being a traditional radio company to today really being a digital first company moving forward. So the experience at AOL was quite honestly invaluable, preparing me for this role.
Well, and your background is very broad. As you just mentioned, you have had a unique focus on content. What was the most rewarding position that you've had over the years?
Well, putting aside the position I'm in now, because this is incredibly rewarding to be leading a local media company like Townsquare across the United States. So other than the role at Townsquare, the most rewarding role for me was actually working in the music industry. I have a passion for music. I was fortunate that when I was growing up in my early teenage years, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to run an entertainment company. And my goal at that time was to either work for Mo Austin, who ran Warner Brothers Music. I was a big Prince fan. I was following Mo Austin. And the other gentleman I was following was Clive Davis, who at that time was at Columbia Records. And he went off and started his own company called Arista Records. So I was very fortunate after graduate school and earning an MBA to start as an assistant at Arista Records. This is back in 1992. I'm dating myself. And I was able to work with an array of amazing musicians from Whitney Houston to Aretha Franklin to Carlos Santana to I have a love of R&B and hip hop. So I was able to work with Biggie Smalls and Outkast. And one of the things that was rewarding because I loved music and connecting somebody who had an amazing skill with an audience. And that's what really attracted me to the marketing role at Arista. But starting as an assistant, particularly coming out of an MBA program, provided me a lifelong lesson that if I ever was fortunate enough to be in a role of management, managing one person or where I am today, managing a team of thousands, always wanted to get the perspective of everybody in the company, particularly those who are doing the day-to-day work and have visibility on the things we're doing well, but quite honestly, the things we're not doing well and what can be improved. So starting in that role, I now literally take an hour a week, and I'll randomly call people through the organization to get their perspective that I otherwise maybe would have never done with that experience at Arista. So that by far was my most rewarding, other than the role I'm in now.
In your background, it seemed like you could suit running a digital marketing or content company. So I'm curious about your attraction to radio. And you talked a little bit about your connection to the music. I know that you had Live 8 concerts, which earned you an Emmy in 2006. And you were in charge of marketing some huge artists, like you had mentioned. So what was the connection to the music industry that drew you that, connect the dots to a radio company?
Yeah, quite honestly, I probably wouldn't have thought of my progression from Arista, Bertelsmann Music Group, now Sony, to AOL to radio, but I grew up with a love of radio. My family would be watching television upstairs, and I would literally have headphones on in the main floor, listening to local radio and that local connection. So my love of music translated directly to my love of radio and the power of radio to connect people. And that was on a personal level. Really, what drew me to Townsquare on a professional level was I was recruited from AOL, and it was the co-founders, Stu Rosenstein, who's currently my CFO, and Stephen Price, who's the chairman of Townsquare. And they were looking for somebody to come in to transform a traditional radio broadcasting company for digital. And this was in early 2010 when they were forming the company. And they challenged me and they said, can you name another traditional media company that has transformed for the digital age and built a foundation for decades and decades of success? And quite honestly, I couldn't name one. And they said, well, wouldn't you love to be part of that and building that? And so my love of radio with my skill set in digital really attracted me to the conversation. What sold me on the opportunity actually was they were really smart. They said, let's go travel to these markets that we're operating in, because a key fundamental differentiation for Townsquare that's incredibly important for people looking at our company from an investment basis, we only operate in markets outside the top 50, and we're very disciplined there. And Stephen and Stu at the time said, listen, you're a big media person. You're coming from Sony Music and AOL, and our markets are not New York, LA, Miami, Chicago. They're Tyler, Texas, Casper, Wyoming, Missoula, Montana. So before I committed to the job, we went on a 10-day road trip throughout Louisiana, Lafayette, and Lake Charles, and throughout Texas, but not Austin, where South by Southwest was, but Tyler, Texas, Lufkin, Texas, Killeen. And what sold me on this opportunity is sitting down with the radio personalities and listening to the content and listening to the local connection they had brought me back to being a teenager at my kitchen table with those headphones. And then the most powerful thing happened. After sitting in a morning show in Lafayette, we went out to the diner with the DJs. And as we were sitting there talking, people were coming over to their table because they heard their voice. And they were talking about what they heard on air today, a week ago. They were talking about their grandkids, their kids, and it was like a family. And I realized they have such a connection and such a powerful connection. Really, the radio DJs to me are the original social influencers. When you think about digital influencers today, there's nobody more powerful than radio DJs. And I saw the power of that in person. And I said, if we could translate that power of what they have over the radio to other platforms across digital, be it websites, be it video, be it social, this could really be something quite unique and quite powerful. So that's what brought me into radio, the combination of my experience as a teenager, my combination of my experience at AOL, and then literally seeing the power of radio, and not just radio, but the fact of these influencers, these DJs. And I clicked in my head, we can translate this power to a digital platform unlike anybody else can do.
That's a fascinating background. And what's interesting is that some of the larger radio players have kind of decreased the amount of talent and gone to more centralized and more national programs. So that connection to the local community is still, I think, relatively unique for Townsquare. So owning small to medium-sized markets doesn't seem like the best platform to launch a digital media enterprise, but that's what you did. And I was wondering, can you talk a little bit more about those unique attributes about small markets that you thought would be able to build a thriving digital business? I mean, you talked a little bit about the local connection, but how does that become the linchpin of a digital business?
It's a great question, because to many it's counterintuitive. A lot of times people think big cities, big audience, big dollars. But it truly, in my view, is a different industry and a different business and markets outside the top 50. The fact is, for Townsquare, in the markets that we operate radio stations in, which is in 67 local markets across the U.S., we reach, just through our AM/FM broadcast today, 1 in 2 adults. So 50% of the adult population on a weekly basis tunes into our broadcast. So to put that in perspective, in a large top 25 market, at best you would get 2 in 10, 20%. So we have an outsized competitive advantage in speaking to 1 in 2 adults. The fact is we have this incredible megaphone. The fact is we have these trusted influencers. When they get on the air and they talk about a product or they talk about a client, people listen and they believe. If you were in larger markets, you wouldn't have that type of connection. You don't have that type of scale. In addition, in these size markets, even back in 2010, but this has accelerated quite a bit in the last 5 years. There's a term called news desert. So as print really went through a ton of hurt in the 08-09 recession, they cut back resources to these size markets. So there was really a news desert, and we stepped in and filled that void by creating content in these size markets. So the size of our audience, the lack of news and information serving these audiences, and then you think about the lack of sophistication and solutions, particularly on the digital side in these size markets. That's why we're so disciplined. We've had opportunities to move into the top 50 markets. We see every acquisition opportunity in the radio space as well in local media, but we're incredibly disciplined, and we see our strategy organically working to great benefit. So although some may think, hey, it's a disadvantage to be outside the top 50 markets, our view is exactly the opposite at it. It is an incredibly differentiated approach and incredibly advantageous to be in that size markets. And I think our results have proven that out over the last few years.
Well, it surely has. The company is at the cusp of generating more revenue from its digital businesses than its traditional businesses. And to further exemplify that shift, you implemented a digital first strategy. And I was wondering, can you give us a little color on the changes that were implemented as a result of that shift in strategy?
Yes. So we became a digital first company in 2020. We've obviously, as I noted earlier, when I was recruited here in 2010, it was always to become a digital company and transform into one. And that pandemic served to accelerate that. It really proved that throughout the pandemic, digital advertising grew in the United States every quarter, where traditional media, be it broadcast on the television side or radio side, obviously took a step back during the pandemic, is now recovering. My view was, as a leader, people rise to the occasion. They will rise to what you ask of them. So we made a lot of commitments. Our commitments was first and foremost, how can we help these local businesses? You think back to March 2020 when the pandemic hit. There was a lot of uncertainty for these small businesses. There were all of a sudden governmental shutdowns, regional shutdowns. So our first approach was, hey, let's not focus on sales or revenue or profit. Our mission right now is, how do we help these local communities? How do we help them, keep them informed about the pandemic? And then from a client perspective, what can we do to help you? So we literally created like PPP packages when the government rolled that out. So we were doing calls in person, virtual, across the board with all of these small businesses. And our only agenda was, how can we help you? And let us educate you if you're not educated on these governmental programs. So it was a complete mind shift of the company to say, it had started in 2010 that digital is an important and is the growth of the company. But our mission, our goals, our compensation structure, all changed throughout the back half of 2020 to be focused on digital. So how our DJs are compensated used to be on terrestrial ratings. And although that's an element of what we do, we move their compensation to digital goals because that's really where the growth is coming from. And radio is a great business. It's a great cash cow, but it's a mature business. It gets about 7% of 7 to 8% of all ad spend, where digital now is over 50%. So we transitioned the company, accelerated that transformation, and really focused on how do we make sure we continue to get not only our fair share, but our outsized portion of digital advertising growth in the US in the years to come. And literally, I can't emphasize enough how significant that change was from a team member employee mindset to our goals and to the solutions and our decision making. It was, I'd say, pretty profound.
Well, what's interesting is that you had double-digit growth even during the pandemic in some of your digital businesses. And so you've had this extraordinary growth. Largely, a lot of that came through internal investments. And so how active have you been in looking at external growth for your digital segment? Are there areas you would feel that there's, some interest in terms of complementing your service offerings? But is it more likely you'll build it internally? Can you give us a sense of what the growth momentum might be for your digital businesses at this point?
Yeah, I think it's two-pronged. I think the good news is, as you noted, we were able to grow our digital advertising, our digital businesses, our digital subscription business on the Townsquare Interactive side throughout the pandemic. We're quite proud of that. Even going back to Q4 2020, we outperformed on a profit level Q4 2019, and then we repeated that in Q1 of this year, 2021. We outperformed profit of Q1 2019. We're continually, as we go forward for this year, comparing ourselves to 2019, given the suppressed revenue and profit throughout 2020. So we, at this point, on a trailing 12-month basis, have grown our revenue, our digital revenue, to 167 million. As you noted, it's almost half of the company's revenue at this point, and it'll continue to grow in percentage and be 50, 60, 70% of our revenue over the coming years. So to your point, we have demonstrated over the last 11 years tremendous innovation internally. That started with building our own audience. When I joined the company in 2010, we had less than 1 million people coming to our owned and operated properties of our local websites. Today, that less than 1 million in 2010 has grown to just under 60 million. So the audience is quite vast, and we organically built a content management system. You referenced my experience at AOL at the top of this discussion, and one of the greatest assets in our company today, and has been since I joined, is our engineering team, our product team, the people who are coders building our products and solutions. I was fortunate when I joined from AOL, I brought 40 engineers, people who code, build programs, build product architecture. And when the first thing they built for us at Townsquare was our content management system to make sure we could easily create content and then monetize that content. And that's been our AMPed, what we called AMPed, which is monetizing our owned and operated audience. The second thing we did in 2012, same team took the foundation of what we used for our own websites and built Townsquare Interactive, which is for small and mid-sized businesses, websites, apps, digital marketing presence, anything around digital marketing is what Townsquare Interactive does. And the same team did that organically. We started with 3 people in 2012. Fast forward today, we have over 625 people in Charlotte with a business that is a monthly subscription business on a run rate, annualized run rate of over $84 million. And the third thing this team and our organic growth, going back to your question, is Townsquare Ignite, which is a demand-side platform. We're integrated with 1,000 exchanges, and it's quite a sophisticated solution, particularly for our size markets. So one of the things I'm very proud of over the last 11 years is the internal innovation. And we have said publicly on our last earnings call that our 167 million in digital revenue will grow to 250 million within 3 years. And when I say that, that's based on all organic internal growth. That said, I'm very confident, just like we did with AMPed, with Townsquare Interactive, with Townsquare Ignite, we will continue to innovate and roll out new digital solutions for local clients and local audiences. That said, we are, to your point, looking at other opportunities in the M&A side, particularly twofold. One, in digital opportunities, we're looking at bolt-ons to Townsquare Interactive, maybe subscription businesses that focus on certain verticals could be quite attractive to accelerate our digital revenue and profit. The other thing we're looking at is traditional local media companies, be it radio broadcasters, TV broadcasts, and others, because we've demonstrated we could take 100% traditional business and transform it to 50% digital revenue with outsized accelerated growth. So we always look at growth opportunities from a M&A standpoint. I believe over the next 2 years, there'll be quite a few of those on the digital side, as well as on the broadcast side. But when I focus on our growth and I provide investors numbers, I always do that based on our own organic growth. So I think taking the two in combination, the opportunity over the next 5 years is quite vast for Townsquare.
And Bill, you touched on a little bit of your digital owned and operated websites and so forth. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because it seems to me like when I look across the spectrum at others, websites, other radio company websites, that you have a little bit unique bent on that. Of course, some of your national brands include Taste of Country, Ultimate Prince, and so forth, but and you have a streaming radio app. But can you talk a little bit about your approach to your websites and how you differentiate those from other media companies?
Yes, great observation, Michael. I think twofold. One is we come at it from a one ecosystem standpoint. So our content strategy is 360 degrees. Wherever a consumer is, we want to make sure our content is in front of them. It sounds somewhat basic, but the truth is, when I joined the company originally, a lot of DJs were hesitant to put their content on the web. They were hesitant to have actually even people streaming their stations because it didn't count towards their Nielsen ratings. And so they were concerned, well, if they listen online, I may not get credit for that. And I said, well, you always want to be where the consumer is. So our content approach has been consumer focused. So to your point, our local radio station websites really have morphed into local radio media brands, or I should say local media brands that compete day in and day out with local newspapers. So we took the psychographic of a radio station. So if you go to most radio station websites that are not Townsquare, as you noted, it looks quite different. It's usually what music are they playing, what are the contents, what contests are they running, what's the schedule. Our approach is the exact opposite, where we'll have that information, but that's 1% of the information. We say, who's the demographic listening to a country music radio station in Flint, Michigan? We're going to create content for that individual. It's usually somebody who's 28 plus, 55% female, 45% male. This is the type of content they want. If it's females, they're going to want information on parenting, recipes. If it's male, they want sports information, NASCAR information, all of those things. So our local media brands became, in essence, almost a hybrid between a magazine approach and a local newspaper. We greatly benefited over the last 10 years as newspapers, A, retrenched, B, put up paywalls. It was one of the reasons that our audience from a radio perspective is 12 million people listening to us on a weekly basis. Just our local media brands reach 40 million people, which is obviously almost 4 times the audience of our AM, FM. So you also mentioned apps. We have our own streaming service. We control it end to end. And every one of our local radio station brands has a standalone app. That's important, A, for content distribution, but B, it's the way into the vehicle. So a lot of people talk about the connected cars and the dashboard of the future. Anybody who gets into a car today, regardless of how old they are, my mother who's 83 and my son who's 16, the first thing they do is plug in their phone. When you plug into a phone into a car today, if you have apps that are integrated with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it takes over the dashboard. So every one of our radio stations has a standalone app integrated with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So your dashboard all of a sudden has your radio stations. Not only can you start the radio station, but voice controls, steering wheel controls all integrate into that experience. So in many ways, it's the premier placement on the dashboard by having the app. So the apps are twofold, content distribution and in the dashboard. So the last thing I'll say on that point, Michael, because most people don't recognize what you just talked about, which is the content strategy of our local brands and national brands. We are literally at Townsquare one of the largest producers of original local content in the United States, size of a Tribune in terms of the amount of original content on a daily basis that we're producing for our websites and apps. And that's one of the reasons our digital advertising has grown so significantly over the last few years.
Well, I think it's a terrific story and a big differentiator for your websites for sure. Let's talk a little bit about Townsquare Interactive. This is your subscription-based business that helps small businesses with web design, CEO, and so forth. Other companies have done this. So I'm interested in your thoughts and what made you look at this as a subscription-based business rather than others that have kind of just done it as a one-off business. And can you maybe add some color on your approach to this business that might be different than others in the industry?
No, great question. Townsquare Interactive, one of the things when I've been in the company for 11 years, but I moved into the CEO role a few years ago. And literally the first thing I did when I moved into this role, after I met with investors, part of the feedback was Townsquare Interactive was not fully understood as a business model as well as their financials. So one of the first things I did was break out Townsquare Interactive's financials for our public reporting, because it is such a meaningful part of our business. It's a growth engine of our business, and it really has been tremendously undervalued. So it's my job over the next couple of years to make sure that value is understood by investors, unlocked, and accelerated. Quite interesting, going back to my anecdote about being in the music industry and starting out as an assistant. The truth of the matter about Townsquare Interactive, it actually came about from an individual in the company in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Each year I go to each one of our markets. I visit in person. I spend time with each one of our teams. And back in 2012, we do an open forum. We give an update on the company, and then we do an hour of Q&A, sometimes longer. And one of the account executives in the room said, we're doing so much great digital work for our own company and for our own radio brands, but when I go call on clients, they need a lot of help. They have a website that's outdated. They can't update it. They're being charged a lot of money. And why can't we do for small businesses what we've done for our own company and really provide first-class solutions for our local businesses in town? And quite honestly, coming from that New York AOM mentality, I'm like, you're telling me businesses here need help with websites, but they're like, yes, they have a website, they're just not happy with it. It's either self-serve and they don't have the time for it, or it's been a local agency in town charging them a huge upfront fee and charging them an hourly edit charge and all of those types of things. So we went back, we did a bunch of research, and we came up with, hey, this is a true market opportunity. And we built Townsquare Interactive. Twofold. It's quite differentiated because it's completely in-house. The solution is not using any third-party platform like WordPress or anything else. It's the engineering team I talked about earlier. So it's controlling that end-to-end experience is very important. The other piece that is quite differentiated is our customer service model. We have white glove customer service. I'm sure everybody says that, but if you call anybody who does web services like GoDaddy or Wix or American Eagle or anybody else, it's usually an 800 number and support@xyz.company. We actually provide you an individual. So Michael, your individual will be Stacy. Stacy's boss is Donna, and they are your marketing consultants. And you know them, they reach out to you every month. They go through your marketing goals. And our whole focus is not only a web presence. That's not the end game of Townsquare Interactive. Our end game for clients is how can we help you grow your business? How can we help your web presence attract incremental customers to your business? So I'll give you a quick anecdote. In Tyler, Texas, if you're a plumber, we go to a plumber and say, how many people come to your website today from search engines? Usually the plumber doesn't know. We ask them if we could look at their analytics. They usually don't know what that is. We walk them through that. We say, okay, how many searches in Tyler are there for plumbers on a monthly basis? They don't know. So we go, there are 1,000 searches in Tyler. You're getting less than 10 today. If I can get you an incremental one customer a month, how much is that customer worth on an annualized basis? For a plumber in Tyler, that may be $650. So we said, if we can, for $300 a month on average, get you one incremental customer, that's worth $650. Would you be interested in that? And they say, that sounds like a good plan. What if I can get you 5 incremental customers a month? That's worth over $3,000. Would you pay $300? They, of course, say yes. So we set up a subscription model because we always want to continue to earn their business. There's no contracts. You can leave at any time. We have one of the lowest churn rates in this business because we're so focused on customer service. So we want to continue to earn your business day in and day out. And the way we do that is help these local businesses grow their business through digital marketing that either they don't have the sophistication or they don't have the time and resources to do. So it is really quite a unique approach, and in our view, a very differentiated competitive advantage, particularly in these size markets where there's really a lack of competition for these types of services.
Well, it's evident that people really like this service. It grew through the pandemic, which is quite extraordinary, and appears to be poised for pretty strong growth going forward. I was wondering if you could just kind of give us an update, Bill, on your guidance, because original guidance, you had given out there was $100 million in revenue in a few years, and it looks like it's growing pretty rapidly, and it could exceed that. So, was wondering if you'd like to update your thoughts on the growth opportunities for this business going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't be more bullish on this business. As you noted, it's grown throughout the pandemic. We literally every quarter double-digit growth throughout the pandemic. As we're coming out of the pandemic, we've had over 12 quarters of 850 net adds. So taking a step back, there's 28 million small and medium-sized businesses in the United States. We focus outside the top 50 markets. So say population's less than 1.5 million. There's 9 million SMBs that fit that profile in our size markets. At $300 on average, that's a $32 billion market opportunity. So you take that 28 million and that 9 million, we strip out anybody who has more than 5 million in annualized revenue and anybody who has more than 24 employees. So we're really focused on small businesses, and that's literally addressable market of 9 million at $300 on average a month. That's $32 billion addressable market for us. So we couldn't be more bullish on that. As you just noted, I think on our last earnings call, we were just under 85 million on an annualized basis. We've grown the top line over 10 million every year for the last 5 or 6 years, and we operate this at roughly a 30% margin. So we've grown the top line 10 million, bottom line 3 million. And we've said, it's probably important also to know, we have a dual sales strategy here. We're utilizing our local market footprint where we have local market account executives in those 67 markets, but we have an inside sales team in Charlotte, over 200 strong. And today, on our last earnings call at least, we had over 57% of our Townsquare Interactive monthly subscribers outside of our local market footprint. So we've shown there is a great need for this, and we could service that need across the U.S. outside the top 50 markets quite well. So we've also noted we're going to open a second location, and our belief is that will accelerate our growth even from what our performance to date over the last few years.
Well, let's go back there, Bill. So you indicated that you're planning to open up a West Coast office, and was wondering what led to that decision. And then if you could just talk a little bit about your future plans. Do you plan to open up additional offices?
Yeah, so right now we're targeting the first half of 2022. We're actually looking at, we're almost finalizing real estate at this point. So we're quite excited. We've actually been hiring people throughout the last 12 months, and they've been working virtually in advance of our office space. So in this West Coast location, we will have all disciplines. So sales, customer service, what we call discipline, so search engine optimization, copywriting, designers, everything. We'll be replicating our Charlotte office, which I noted earlier. We started in 2012 with 3 employees. Today is over 600. So we see that market opportunity of 32 billion, 9 million SMBs, and today, we're well south of 50,000. So we see that market opportunity, and we really want to scale much more quickly and be much more aggressive in capturing that. So first is a second location on the West Coast. To your point, could there be future locations? Definitely, maybe central United States, but I'd say for the next 2 to 3 years, we're focused on scaling the West Coast operation, and then from there we'll go. Because the other thing we've been testing is utilizing our inside sales force to sell other products in addition to Townsquare Interactive. And although that work is, I'd say, in the early innings, it's quite exciting, and I think you'll see other products being sold through this inside sales team to markets where we don't have a local presence quite successfully, like we've proven with Townsquare Interactive.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other products. In the digital segment, you have Townsquare Ignite, which is your programmatic business, and I was just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the uniqueness that you offer in terms of Townsquare Ignite relative to others that are in that space.
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I think the most simplistic way to look at it is Townsquare Ignite has become a digital agency. So we sit down with clients and we literally understand their goals, understand their challenges, and we come up with their marketing campaign. What's the right message? We then do all of the creative. We then serve that ad to the right audience at the right time across all platforms, be that websites, apps. Now OTT is a big part of what we're doing, connected televisions, as well as social media like TikTok and Instagram and obviously Facebook. And then we've morphed, once we run, come up with a creative, create the creative, run the creative, we then provide very in-depth reporting and insights. And we're sitting down with the client like an agency would and reviewing that and then optimizing the campaigns moving forward. In our size markets, there is not a lot of competition. Clearly there's competition, there's local agencies, but local agencies normally, what we've seen at least, will have very few inventory resources. They'll set up a Google display network, which anyone can do. My son, who's 16, set up a Google display network for his business, or they'll buy Facebook ads themselves. We've created through our technology team our own demand side platform. So we're integrated with literally 1,000 exchanges of inventory. So we have an outsized competitive advantage because some of these exchanges require 7-figure minimums a month. So if you're a local agency in town, that's just not realistic. Or even like an ad taxi, which some may be familiar with, their minimum campaign spend is 5-6 figures for local clients. Where we come in with $1,000 minimum, we can help literally any size client. So it's quite differentiated. The solutions are quite sophisticated and they're quite powerful. So that is one of the reasons why Townsquare Ignite is the fastest growing part of our company today. And that goes in line with what's happening in the United States in terms of the advertising market. Programmatic digital advertising is the fastest part of advertising growth in the US. And our belief, and I think the experts would concur, is that is going to continue over the next 5 years. So in our view, we couldn't be better situated in our markets, and then utilizing Townsquare Interactive's inside sales team, which I was just describing, selling this Townsquare Ignite programmatic solution outside of our markets. So really looking forward to continuing to leverage our existing team, but as we open up that West Coast operation, it could be quite exciting for our digital agency.
Well, what's interesting is that Townsquare Ignite, coming out of the pandemic, has had this really strong growth. And I was wondering if you can update us on your growth targets for Townsquare Ignite.
Yeah, so just like Townsquare Interactive, we anticipate it will be over 100 million in revenue, digital revenue, in the next 3 years. So we've kind of taken a step back, and our trailing 12-month digital revenue is 167 million. We've now said we're going to do 250 million within 3 years, and Ignite is going to be the fastest growth part of that business moving forward. So we're monetizing our owned and operated inventory. We have a digital agency in Ignite doing programmatic across all platforms. And then we've got Townsquare Interactive, which is a digital marketing subscription business. So the combination of the three, in our view, is unparalleled in our size markets. If you're in New York, Chicago, LA, you may be able to put these pieces of the equation together, but there's nobody who's operating at scale, focused on these size markets, bringing these types of solutions. And then you take our digital business, which is the growth engine, and then you overlay that with what we were talking about earlier, which is a cash cow business in radio. And when you think about radio in our size market, reaching 50% of the adult population, we can then use the radio platform to really magnify our digital products to the audience there. And the audience obviously includes SMBs. So we get a lot of people listening to our radio stations, and we'll be talking about our own digital products. And they're reaching out directly to us saying, hey, I heard that on the radio. Can you come in and give me a consultation on your digital agency? So it's a great ecosystem that we think is highly differentiated in local media. And you'll continue to see us very disciplined in operating outside the top 50 markets.
Well, I think I'd be amiss if I didn't talk a little bit about radio. And in your thoughts on radio, particularly, some in the industry even have said, we wonder how radio is going to bounce back with more people working remotely, whether drive times are going to be, come back and, advertising come back in drive times. What are your thoughts about the future of radio and radio advertising?
Yeah, listen, two things. I think radio, what you've seen through the pandemic is that connection, and people are looking for that companionship as well as trusted news sources. Nothing's more important today than trusted news sources, and there's no better trusted news source, in my view, than radio. To the fact, and I think the data demonstrates this, 5 years ago, broadcast television was the #1 reach medium in the United States. Today, radio has surpassed TV and is incredibly stable. 93% of Americans listen to radio on a weekly basis. That's been the same for decades. Given the population growth, more people listen to radio today than listened to 20 years ago. The opposite is obviously true for television. So I think when you think about brand awareness, top of the funnel marketing, that connection, radio will bounce back. And I think particularly in our size markets where there is that lack of news and information, newspapers have retreated, others have retreated from these smaller markets because they do have larger markets. So we've seen this in our own broadcast business, that the rebound has been significant. And I think we'll not only return to 2019 levels, but as we saw prior to 2019, we believe there's still growth in radio. We're going to treat it as a mature cash cow just because we're a digital first company now. But my view on radio is quite bullish in terms of the connectivity of consumers. And if you believe money follows eyeballs, then radio is well positioned for the future.
And let's touch on your other segment, your entertainment segment, obviously really significantly affected by the pandemic. How do you think this business rebounds? What are your thoughts about the opportunities in your entertainment? Do you think you broaden that out to other types of entertainment venues? What are your thoughts about that segment?
So for Townsquare, our entertainment, which is our live event division, is a small component of our company. We do well over 400 million on an annualized basis of revenue. This is in a non-pandemic prior to I guess it was 2019, we did about 16 million, just to put it in scale. But it's incredibly advantageous for us to have this division because, in my view, it does two things. It markets our own brands, and it markets our own brands in a profitable manner because we operated at roughly a 22% margin business prior to the pandemic. So we do roughly 200 events on an annual basis prior to COVID, and we expect to go back to doing 200 events and then growing from there in the future. What we've seen in 2021 is, as the restrictions have lifted, our live event business has seen great demand, which is, I think, natural in America. People now, vaccinated, they want to get out, they want to reconnect with people. So I think I mentioned on our last earnings call, we had our first event was actually on May 1st in Tyler, Texas, and it was a music concert, and it was sold out, and it set revenue records and profit records. We've then since then gone on sale for other events. Taste of Fort Collins is coming up next week, other events, and the same thing has happened. There's pent-up demand, which I think will continue not only for the remainder of this year, but importantly for 22 and 23. So for ourselves as well as others in the live event business, I think the next few years are going to be very robust with strong consumer demand to get out and reconnect with others.
Well, Bill, I really appreciate the insights you've given us on your company, the terrific insights on the growth opportunities in digital. I thought it was a great interview. Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Thank you for the questions, and look forward to reconnecting with everybody soon.
Thank you for joining us for this C-Suite interview presentation brought to you by channelchek. Visit our YouTube channel for more interview content, as well as virtual roadshows and conference presentation replays. New content is added regularly, so subscribe below to stay up to date. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description to access equity research, news, and advanced market data on this and the 6,000 other small and micro-cap companies listed.